In 1963, a man in Cappadocia, Turkey, knocked down a wall in his basement. Behind it, he uncovered a room. Behind that room, another chamber. Beyond that, a narrow tunnel. The tunnel sloped downward. He followed it, down through solid rock, past one level, then another, then another. He kept moving deeper. When archaeologists finally mapped what he'd uncovered, they were stunned. The tunnel system plunged 280 feet into the earth, 18 levels carved straight from volcanic stone, miles of corridors linking thousands of rooms, ventilation shafts, water wells, storage chambers, living quarters, chapels, even a school. This was Derinkuyu, the largest underground city ever brought to light. And here's the part that keeps me awake at night. It could house 20,000 people, not for a few days, for months, maybe years. The ventilation system still functions. The wells still deliver water. Massive circular stone doors roll closed from inside. Each level could be sealed independently. Once those doors shut, nobody was getting through. Someone built this. Not recently. The earliest sections date back at least 2,800 years, possibly older. Nobody knows for certain. But here's the real question, the one that matters. Why? Why would anyone carve an entire city into solid rock? Why descend 18 levels? Why design it to hold 20,000 people for long stretches of time? Why the rolling stone doors? Why seal every level separately? What were they hiding from? The standard explanation is invaders. Armies swept across this region for thousands of years. Hittites, Persians, Romans, Arabs, Mongols. Having somewhere to hide makes sense. But here's what bothers me. You don't build something this elaborate for occasional raids. Raids last days, maybe a week. You could hide in caves for that. You could flee to the mountains. This is different. This is architecture born of sustained terror. This is what you build when the threat isn't temporary, when you know it's coming back, when you know you'll need to disappear underground for months at a time. And Derinkuyu isn't alone. They found dozens of underground cities in Cappadocia, hundreds of smaller tunnel networks. Some connect to each other through miles of passages. You could travel between cities without ever seeing the surface. An entire civilization went underground. The question isn't just what they were hiding from. It's what did they know that we don't. Building an underground city sounds impossible. Not difficult, impossible. You're not digging a basement. You're not carving out a wine cellar. You're excavating millions of cubic feet of solid volcanic rock by hand with bronze and iron tools. No explosives, no power tools, no modern engineering. The rock at Derinkuyu is called tuff. It's compressed volcanic ash. That's good news and bad news. Good news, when you first cut into it, it's relatively soft. You can shape it. Bad news, it's still rock. You're still chipping away tiny fragments at a time. Let's do the math. Derinkuyu is roughly 280 feet deep, 18 levels. The complex spans about 4 square miles. If you count all the corridors, conservative estimates place the total volume at around 2.5 million cubic feet of removed stone. That's not an abstract number. That's rock that had to go somewhere. Where did it go? Nobody knows. There's no massive debris pile near the city. No ancient quarry filled with tuff. The rock simply vanished. Either they hauled it miles away, or they ground it down and scattered it. Both options are insane when you consider the labor involved. Here's what makes it worse. They didn't just dig down, they carved. Every room has smooth walls, curved ceilings, decorative columns. Some corridors have stairs cut directly into the stone. The ventilation shafts are perfectly vertical for hundreds of feet. The wells are narrow and precise. This isn't mining. This is sculpture. And they did it in darkness. Think about that. You're 200 feet underground. No windows, no natural light. You're working by oil lamp or torch. Smoke from your light source fills the chamber. You can barely breathe. You can barely see. And you're supposed to carve precise architectural features into solid rock. The ventilation system alone is a miracle. There are 52 ventilation shafts at Derinkuyu. They run from the surface to the lowest levels. Some are over 180 feet deep. They're about 3 feet wide, perfectly straight, perfectly vertical. How do you dig a vertical shaft 180 feet deep through solid rock? You can't dig from the bottom up. You have to start at the surface and work your way down. But if you're digging straight down, how do you remove the debris? How do you deliver tools to workers below? How do you stop the shaft from collapsing as it deepens? And here's the thing. These shafts had to be completed first, before you could excavate the rest of the city, because without ventilation, everyone underground would suffocate. You need airflow before you can have 20,000 people living in sealed chambers. So the first workers had to dig blind, not knowing if it would work, not knowing if the entire project was even possible, just cutting downward through darkness and hoping. The water system is just as extreme. There are wells throughout the city. They tap underground aquifers. Some wells are over 180 feet deep. They're narrow, maybe 2 feet wide, drilled straight down through solid rock until they hit water. But here's what gets me. The wells are perfectly positioned. They hit water at different levels. That means whoever designed this understood the geology. They knew where the aquifers were. They knew how deep to dig. They planned the entire city around water sources they couldn't see. How? There's no trial and error here. You can't dig a test well 180 feet deep, realize you missed the aquifer, and try again 10 feet over. Every well had to work the first time. The planning had to be flawless. And then there are the doors. The famous rolling stone doors of Derinkuyu. Massive circular slabs of rock, 3 to 5 feet in diameter, 1 to 2 feet thick. They weigh between 400 and 1,000 pounds. They roll along tracks carved into the floor. When closed, they seal passages completely. Each level has multiple doors, maybe 20 per level. That's hundreds of these enormous stone wheels spread throughout the city. Carving them is one thing. Installing them is another. The doors had to be perfectly round, perfectly balanced. The tracks had to be perfectly level. The door had to roll smoothly despite weighing half a ton, and it had to seal tightly enough to block enemies, yet easily enough for people inside to move it. They accomplished all of this in darkness, hundreds of feet underground. But wait, it gets stranger. The doors only lock from the inside. There's a hole in the center of each door. You can push a pole through it and roll the door closed from inside the chamber. But once it's shut, there's no way to open it from the outside. No handles, no mechanisms, nothing. This means the city was designed for defense from within, not as a fortress you retreat to and then counterattack from, but as a hiding place, a sealed tomb you enter and lock behind you, hoping whatever is outside eventually gives up and leaves. Who designs a city like that? The layout tells you more about the fear.
The upper levels are simple. Storage rooms, animal pens, basic chambers. If you're hiding from a quick raid, you stay here, close the first door, and wait it out. But the deeper you go, the more complex everything becomes. Living quarters, kitchens, schools, churches, meeting halls. These are spaces for long-term habitation, for communities, for life underground. The lowest levels are the most protected, the most isolated. Multiple doors stand between them and the surface. These are the final refuge, the place you go when everything else fails. The city is designed in layers of rising desperation. And here's what haunts me. They used it. We know they used it. The walls are stained with soot from thousands of oil lamps. The wells show signs of routine maintenance. Storage rooms held food remains. Living quarters show evidence of occupation. People lived down there. Not for days, for extended periods. Generations of people knew these tunnels, knew which corridors led where, knew how to navigate in darkness, knew how to survive without seeing the sun. There are children's rooms in Derinkuyu, small chambers with low ceilings. Carved toys were found in the debris. These weren't emergency shelters. These were homes. Kids grew up down there in sealed chambers, learning to live like moles. What kind of world makes that necessary? The engineering grows more impressive the longer you think about it. The ventilation shafts don't just supply air, they're positioned to create natural circulation. Warm air rises through some shafts, cool air descends through others. The entire system breathes without mechanical help. The wells are connected by channels. If one well runs dry, water flows from others. The system is redundant, resilient, designed to keep working even when parts fail. The corridors twist and turn. They're deliberately confusing. If enemies somehow breach the doors, they get lost in the maze, but residents would know the routes, the shortcuts, the hidden passages, the escape paths. Because yes, there are escape tunnels, routes that lead to other underground cities miles away. You could leave Derinkuyu without ever reaching the surface, travel through solid rock to another refuge entirely. They thought of everything, every detail, every contingency. This wasn't built in panic. This was planned, engineered, refined over generations. And that's what scares me. This level of preparation doesn't come from one bad experience. It comes from repeated trauma, from a threat so consistent, so inevitable, that you spend centuries building underground cities, that you teach your children to live in darkness, that you shape your entire civilization around the ability to disappear.
The engineering becomes even more astonishing the deeper you look. The ventilation shafts don't merely bring in air. They're arranged to create natural circulation. Warm air rises through certain shafts. Cool air sinks through others. The entire system breathes on its own, without machines. The water wells are linked by channels. If one dries up, water flows in from another. It's redundant, resilient, built to keep functioning even when parts fail. The corridors twist and coil. They're intentionally disorienting. If enemies somehow make it past the doors, they become lost in the labyrinth. But the residents would know the routes. They'd know the shortcuts, the hidden passages, the escape tunnels. Yes, escape tunnels. Passages leading to other underground cities miles away. You could leave Derinkuyu without ever seeing daylight. Move through solid stone to another refuge entirely. They accounted for everything, every detail, every scenario. This wasn't created in a moment of panic. It was planned, engineered, refined across generations.
And that's the part that unsettles me. This degree of preparation doesn't come from a single bad event. It comes from repeated trauma, from a danger so constant, so unavoidable, that people spend centuries carving cities beneath the earth, that they teach their children how to live without sunlight, that they organize their entire civilization around the ability to vanish. And here's what truly haunts me. They used it. We know they did. The walls carry soot stains from thousands of oil lamps. The wells show signs of regular upkeep. Storage chambers held food remains. Living areas show clear evidence of occupation. People lived down there, not for days, for long stretches of time. Generations memorized these tunnels. They knew which corridors went where. They learned to navigate in darkness. They learned how to survive without seeing the sky. There are children's rooms inside Derinkuyu, small chambers with low ceilings. Carved toys were found among the debris. These weren't temporary shelters. These were homes. Children grew up in sealed stone chambers, learning to live like burrowing animals. What kind of world makes that necessary? The layout itself tells the story. The upper levels are simple: storage rooms, animal pens, basic spaces. If you're hiding from a quick raid, you stay here, close the first door, and wait. But the deeper you descend, the more complex everything becomes. Living quarters, kitchens, schools, churches, meeting halls. These are places meant for long-term life, for communities, for existence underground. The lowest levels are the most protected, the most isolated. Multiple doors separate them from the surface. These are the last refuge, the place you go when everything else fails. The city is built in layers of rising desperation.
And here's what truly disturbs me. They lived there. We know they did. The walls are darkened by soot from countless oil lamps. The wells show evidence of steady maintenance. Storage rooms contained traces of food. Living spaces reveal signs of long-term use. People stayed down there. Not for a few days, for extended periods. Entire generations knew these tunnels. They knew which passages led where. They knew how to move in total darkness. They knew how to survive without sunlight. There are children's rooms inside Derinkuyu. Small chambers with low ceilings. Carved toys were discovered in the rubble. These weren't emergency hideouts. These were homes. Kids grew up underground in sealed stone spaces, learning to live like creatures of the earth. What kind of world forces that? The engineering becomes more impressive the longer you think about it. The ventilation shafts don't just supply air. They're arranged to create natural circulation. Warm air rises through certain shafts. Cool air sinks through others. The whole system breathes on its own. No machines. The water wells are connected by channels. If one well dries up, water flows in from another. The system is redundant, resilient, designed to keep working even when parts fail. The corridors twist and turn. They're deliberately confusing. If enemies somehow make it past the doors, they get lost in the maze. But residents would know the paths, the shortcuts, the hidden routes, the escape tunnels. Yes, escape tunnels. Passages that lead to other underground cities miles away. You could flee Derinkuyu without ever surfacing. Travel through solid rock to another sanctuary. They planned for everything. Every detail. Every possibility. This wasn't built in fear. It was designed, engineered, refined across generations. And that's what scares me. This level of preparation doesn't come from a single disaster. It comes from repeated trauma. From a threat so reliable, so inevitable, that people spend centuries carving refuge beneath the ground. That they teach their children to live without light. That they build their entire civilization around the ability to disappear. The city tells that story in stone.
And now, the water system, because it's just as insane. There are wells throughout the city. They tap into underground aquifers. Some wells drop more than 180 feet. They're narrow, maybe 2 feet wide, drilled straight down through solid rock until they strike water. But here's what really gets me. The wells are perfectly positioned. They hit water at different depths. That means whoever designed this understood geology. They knew where the aquifers were. They knew exactly how deep to dig. They planned the entire city around invisible water sources. How? There's no room for trial and error. You can't drill a test well 180 feet deep, realize you missed the aquifer, then try again 10 feet over. Every well had to work on the first attempt. The planning had to be exact. And then there are the doors. The famous rolling stone doors of Derinkuyu. Massive circular slabs, 3 to 5 feet in diameter, 1 to 2 feet thick. They weigh between 400 and 1,000 pounds. They roll along tracks carved directly into the floor. When closed, they seal passages completely. Each level contains multiple doors, maybe 20 per level. That's hundreds of enormous stone wheels throughout the city. Carving them is one thing, installing them is another. Each door had to be perfectly round, perfectly balanced. The tracks had to be flawlessly level. The door had to roll smoothly despite weighing half a ton, and it had to seal tightly enough to block intruders, yet lightly enough for people inside to move it. They achieved all of this underground, in darkness, hundreds of feet below the surface. But it gets stranger. The doors only lock from inside. There's a hole in the center of each one. You insert a pole and roll the door shut from within the chamber. But once closed, there's no way to open it from the outside. No handles, no levers, nothing. Which means this city was designed for defense from within, not as a fortress you retreat to and then attack from, but as a hiding place, a sealed tomb you enter and lock behind you, hoping whatever waits outside eventually gives up and leaves. Who designs a city like that?
The layout tells you everything about the fear. The upper levels are simple. Storage rooms, animal pens, basic chambers. If you're hiding from a quick raid, you stay here, close the first door, and wait it out. But the deeper you go, the more complex it becomes. Living quarters, kitchens, schools, churches, meeting halls. These are spaces meant for long-term life, for communities, for existence underground. The lowest levels are the most protected, the most isolated. Multiple doors stand between them and the surface. These are the final refuge, the place you retreat to when everything else fails. The city is structured in layers of growing desperation. And here's what stays with me. They used it. We know they did. The walls are blackened with soot from thousands of oil lamps. The wells show signs of continual maintenance. Storage chambers held food remains. Living spaces show clear evidence of habitation. People lived down there, not briefly, for extended stretches. Generations memorized these tunnels. They knew which corridors went where. They learned to move in total darkness. They figured out how to survive without ever seeing the sun. There are children's rooms inside Derinkuyu, small chambers with low ceilings. Carved toys were uncovered in the debris. These weren't emergency shelters. These were homes. Kids grew up in sealed stone spaces, learning to live underground, like burrowing creatures. What kind of world forces that? The engineering only becomes more impressive the longer you think about it. The ventilation shafts don't just deliver air. They're positioned to create natural circulation. Warm air rises through certain shafts. Cool air descends through others. The whole system breathes naturally. The water wells are linked by channels. If one runs dry, water flows from another. The system is redundant, resilient, designed to keep working even when parts fail. The corridors wind and twist. They're intentionally confusing. If enemies breach the doors, they become lost in the maze. But residents would know the paths, the shortcuts, the hidden routes, the escape tunnels. Yes, escape tunnels. Passages that lead to other underground cities miles away. You could leave Derinkuyu without ever surfacing, travel through solid rock to another refuge. They planned for everything, every detail, every possibility. This wasn't built in panic. It was planned, engineered, refined over generations. And that's what unsettles me most. This level of preparation doesn't come from a single bad experience. It comes from repeated trauma, from a threat so reliable, so unavoidable, that people spent centuries carving refuge beneath the earth, that they taught their children to live without daylight, that they built their entire civilization around the ability to disappear. And that's what truly frightens me. This degree of preparation doesn't come from one bad moment. It comes from repeated trauma, from a danger so consistent, so inevitable, that entire generations committed themselves to carving cities beneath the surface. That they taught their children to exist in darkness. That they organized their civilization around vanishing. And here's the thing. They didn't just dig down, they sculpted. Every room has smooth walls, curved ceilings, decorative columns. Some passages have steps cut directly into stone. The ventilation shafts are perfectly vertical for hundreds of feet. The wells are narrow and exact. This isn't mining. This is craftsmanship. And they did it without light. Think about that. You're 200 feet underground, no windows, no natural illumination. You're working by torch or oil lamp. Smoke from your flame fills the chamber, breathing is difficult, vision is limited, and you're expected to carve precise architectural features into solid rock. The ventilation system alone borders on miraculous. There are 52 ventilation shafts at Derinkuyu. They stretch from the surface to the lowest levels. Some descend more than 180 feet. They're roughly 3 feet wide, perfectly straight, perfectly vertical. How do you excavate a vertical shaft 180 feet deep through solid rock? You can't dig from the bottom upward. You must begin at the surface and move downward. But if you're digging straight down, how do you clear debris? How do you send tools to workers below? How do you keep the shaft from collapsing as depth increases? And here's the part people forget. These shafts had to be completed first, before the rest of the city could exist. Because without ventilation, everyone underground would suffocate. You need airflow before you can house 20,000 people in sealed chambers. So the first workers had to dig blind, not knowing if it would succeed, not knowing if the project was even possible, just carving downward through darkness and hoping. The water system is just as extreme. There are wells scattered throughout the city. They tap deep underground aquifers. Some descend more than 180 feet. They're narrow, maybe 2 feet wide, cut straight down through solid rock until they strike water. But here's what really stands out. The wells are placed with precision. They reach water at different depths, which means whoever designed this understood the geology. They knew where the aquifers lay. They knew exactly how far to dig. They planned the entire city around invisible water sources. How? There's no room for experimentation. You can't dig a test well 180 feet deep, realize you missed the aquifer, then try again a few feet away. Every well had to succeed on the first attempt. The planning had to be perfect. And then come the doors, the iconic rolling stone doors of Derinkuyu. Massive circular slabs, 3 to 5 feet across, 1 to 2 feet thick. They weigh between 400 and 1,000 pounds. They roll along grooves carved directly into the floor. When closed, they seal corridors completely. Each level holds multiple doors, maybe 20 per floor. That's hundreds of giant stone wheels throughout the city. Carving them is one challenge, installing them is another. Each door had to be perfectly round, perfectly balanced. The tracks had to be flawlessly level. The door had to move smoothly despite weighing half a ton, and it had to seal tightly enough to block intruders while remaining manageable for people inside. They achieved all of this underground, in total darkness, hundreds of feet beneath the surface. But it gets stranger. The doors lock only from the inside. Each has a hole in the center. You slide a pole through it and roll the door shut from within the chamber. But once closed, there's no way to open it from outside. No handles, no mechanisms, nothing. Which means the city was designed for defense from within, not as a fortress you retreat to and then counterattack from, but as a hiding place, a sealed tomb you enter and lock behind you, hoping whatever waits outside eventually gives up and moves on. Who designs a city like that?
The upper levels are simple. Storage chambers, animal pens, basic rooms. If you're hiding for a short raid, you stay here, close the first door, and wait. But the deeper you descend, the more complex everything becomes. Living quarters, kitchens, schools, churches, meeting halls. These are spaces built for long-term habitation, for communities, for life underground. The lowest levels are the most protected, the most isolated. Multiple doors separate them from the surface. These are the final refuge, the place you go when every other option is gone. The city is arranged in layers of increasing desperation. And here's what stays with me. They used it. We know they did. The walls are stained with soot from countless oil lamps. The wells show evidence of regular upkeep. Storage rooms held traces of food. Living spaces reveal signs of occupation. People lived down there. Not briefly, for long periods. Generations memorized these tunnels. They knew which corridors led where. They learned to move through darkness. They learned to survive without sunlight. There are children's rooms inside Derinkuyu. Small chambers with low ceilings. Carved toys were found in the debris. These weren't emergency shelters. These were homes. Children grew up in sealed stone chambers, learning to live underground. What kind of world requires that? The engineering only becomes more impressive the longer you consider it. The ventilation shafts don't simply provide air. They're arranged to create natural circulation. Warm air rises through certain shafts. Cool air sinks through others. The whole system breathes on its own. The wells are connected by channels. If one runs dry, water flows from another. The system is redundant, resilient, designed to keep working even when parts fail. The corridors twist and coil. They're intentionally disorienting. If enemies breach the doors, they become lost in the maze. But residents would know the paths, the shortcuts, the hidden routes, the escape tunnels. Yes, escape tunnels. Passages leading to other underground cities miles away. You could leave Derinkuyu without ever seeing daylight. travel through solid rock to another refuge. They planned for everything. Every detail. Every possibility. This wasn't built in panic. It was planned, engineered, refined across generations. And that's what truly unsettles me. This level of preparation doesn't come from a single disaster. It comes from repeated trauma. From a threat so persistent, so unavoidable, that people spent centuries carving refuge beneath the earth. That they taught their children to live without the sun. That they built their civilization around disappearing.
The doors are what make this real. Not the size of the city. Not the depth. The doors. Because when you see them, you understand. This wasn't theoretical. This wasn't just in case. These doors were meant to be used. They're massive. Circular stone wheels about 5 feet in diameter. Some weigh over 1,000 pounds. They roll on tracks carved into the floor. When closed, they seal the passage completely. No gaps, no cracks. Just solid stone blocking the way. Each door has a hole in the center, about 6 inches across. Just wide enough to slide a spear through. That's deliberate. You can defend the doorway from behind. Anyone trying to force it gets a spear in the face. But you can't reach through to unlock it. You can't slip a tool through to roll it open. The doors only open from inside. That matters. There's no handle on the outside. No way to grip the stone. No way to gain leverage. If you're in the tunnel and the door rolls shut, you're trapped. You're not getting through. Archaeologists found these doors on multiple levels. Not just at the entrance. Every major corridor has one. Every connection between floors. Every critical junction. The city is divided into segments. Each segment can be isolated. That's not normal defensive design. Castles have gates. Walls have doors. But you don't seal off every hallway. You don't create dozens of separate zones unless you expect to lose ground. Unless you plan to retreat level by level. The doors tell a story. Someone enters the city. Maybe they breach the first level. You don't panic. You fall back. Roll the door closed behind you. Now they're stuck. They can't follow. They can't break through 1,000 pounds of stone. They're trapped in empty chambers while you're safe below. But here's the thing. If it's just raiders, why would they follow you down? Raiders want livestock, grain, gold, things they can carry. They don't want to fight through 18 levels of underground corridors for people hiding in darkness. The doors suggest something else. Something that would follow you down. Something that wouldn't stop at the surface.
something persistent.
Look at the placement. The first door sits about 50 feet from the main entrance. That's close. You get everyone inside. You move them past the first checkpoint. You seal it fast. Then there's another door 100 feet deeper. Then another. Then another. 7 major doors between the surface and the lowest level. Each one buying time. Each one creating another barrier. The doors on the lower levels are different. Heavier, thicker, more carefully made. The ones near the surface are functional. The ones deep below are fortresses. As if they expected that if something got past the first few doors, the lower ones had to hold no matter what. Some doors include additional features. Stone bars that drop into place, secondary locking points, reinforcement channels. These aren't just rolled shut, they're secured, barricaded, made permanent. Why? If you're hiding from an army, you don't need that. Armies don't sit there chipping through stone doors, they move on. But if you're hiding from something else, something patient, something that might wait, then every extra barrier matters. The doors at Kaymakli, a nearby complex, follow the same design, same weight, same one-way mechanism. At Oskanak, archaeologists found doors with even more defensive features. Channels above them for pouring hot oil, murder holes cut into ceilings, guard positions carved into walls. This is military engineering. Sophisticated military engineering. Someone studied how to defend underground space, how to create choke points, how to turn corridors into killing zones. The Romans wrote manuals on fortification. They described walls and towers, but they never wrote about this. They never described defending subterranean cities with rolling stone discs. This knowledge came from somewhere older, somewhere else. The doors wear wear, grooves worn deep into the tracks, polished edges on the stone. These doors weren't used once. They were rolled closed, rolled open, closed again, over and over. The stone is smoothed in places from repeated movement. That means the threat returned. Whatever they were hiding from wasn't a single event. It was recurring. Predictable enough to design for. Frequent enough to use the defenses regularly. Some doors are jammed now, frozen in place, their tracks clogged with debris. Archaeologists had to dig around them, clear them carefully to avoid damaging the mechanisms. When they finally freed one door, they tried to move it. It still rolled. After thousands of years, the engineering still functioned. That's precision. The tracks are perfectly level. The stone is perfectly round. The weight is balanced. One person can roll these doors. Push from the inside. The door moves. Seals the passage, locks you in. Locks you in. That's the part that unsettles me. These doors don't just keep things out. They keep you in. Once closed, you're committed. You're underground, cut off from sunlight, from fresh air, from the outside world. Who chooses that? Who says, yes, I'll take my family 200 feet below ground and seal stone doors behind us? What has to be happening on the surface to make that the better option? The doors near living areas are different from the ones near storage. Living quarter doors are heavier, more secure. as if they expected people to remain behind them for long stretches, as if those rooms had to be the safest places. There are small chambers beside some doors, guard posts. Someone sat there, watched the door, waited, ready to defend if something tried to force its way through, ready to raise the alarm if the door began to move. These chambers have carved benches, niches for oil lamps, weapon racks cut into the walls. This wasn't temporary duty. This was a post, someone's job. Someone spent hours, maybe days, sitting in darkness behind 1,000 pounds of stone, watching, waiting. For what? What comes through a stone door? What requires a guard with a spear sitting in the dark behind half a ton of rock? The doors have one more feature: small drainage channels carved around their edges. If water seeps in, it runs into these grooves and flows away. It doesn't pool. It doesn't create pressure that could shift the door. That's foresight. That's understanding you might be underground during rain, during snowmelt, during floods, and the door still has to hold, still seal, still protect. Some doors show damage, scratches on the outer face, marks where something tried to break through. Not battering rams, not siege tools. The marks are wrong for that. They're scattered, random, like something clawed at the stone. Maybe it's erosion, maybe water damage, maybe nothing. But when you stand in those tunnels and see those marks by lamplight, they don't look like nothing. The doors are still there, still functional, still ready. If something happened today, if some new threat appeared, you could roll those doors shut, seal yourself in. The city would work. The defenses would hold. That's what keeps me awake. Not that ancient people built this, but that it still works. That whatever danger they prepared for might still matter. That these doors might still be needed. Because they built this to last. They built it for their children and their children's children. They built it as if the danger were permanent and safety was temporary. The doors tell us that. Every stone wheel weighing 1,000 pounds says the same thing. Whatever they feared, they never stopped fearing it. They never felt safe enough to abandon these defenses. They never said, "We don't need this anymore." They kept the doors maintained. They kept the tracks clear. They kept the mechanisms working generation after generation, century after century. The doors stayed ready. That isn't paranoia. That's memory. That's knowing something your descendants need to understand. Something important enough to preserve in stone, in engineering, in defensive architecture meant to endure forever. The doors are still waiting, even now, ready to roll closed one more time. The passages between levels are designed to kill you. Not quickly, slowly, deliberately, with calculation. Most tunnels at Derinkuyu are narrow.
about 5 feet tall, maybe 3 feet wide. You can't stand straight. You have to crouch, lean forward, move sideways in places. Your shoulders scrape the walls. That's intentional. A single defender can control a narrow passage. One person with a spear owns that space. Attackers can't spread out. They can't use numbers. They can't overwhelm with force. They have to come one at a time, and each one dies. The ceiling height changes constantly. You walk hunched over. Then suddenly it drops. You crawl. Then it rises. Then drops again. This isn't random. This is tactical. When you're crawling, you're vulnerable. Your hands are on the ground. Your weapon is useless. Your head is down. Someone waiting around the corner has every advantage. You can't see them. You can't block. You can't dodge. You just die.
The corridors twist sharply every 20 or 30 feet. You can't see what's ahead. You can't charge forward. You can't build momentum. Every corner is a potential ambush. Every turn could be your last. There are alcoves carved into the walls, small recesses just large enough for one person to stand. These aren't decorative, they're combat positions. Someone hides in the alcove. You walk past. They step out behind you. You never knew they were there. The floors slope, sometimes up, sometimes down, never flat for long. This wears you out, throws off your balance, makes you tired. And when you're exhausted and unsteady, you make mistakes. Mistakes get you killed. Some passages have steps carved directly into the rock, but the steps are uneven, different heights, different depths. You can't find a rhythm. You can't move fast. You have to watch your feet. And while you're watching your feet, you're not watching ahead. The ventilation shafts create another danger. They run vertically through multiple levels, about 2 feet wide. If you're defending, you can drop things down these shafts. Rocks, boiling water, hot oil, whatever you have. The shaft carries it straight to the level below. Anyone underneath gets hit. They don't see it coming. They can't block it. The shaft is too narrow to climb, too smooth to grip. There are murder holes cut into some ceilings, small openings just big enough to thrust a spear through. You're walking down a passage. Someone above strikes. The spear drops through the ceiling. You never saw them. You never had a chance. The passages connect in specific patterns, multiple routes between levels, but not all paths are equal. Some are obvious, wide, well lit. These are traps. The real defenders use the narrow tunnels, the hidden ones, the routes that twist and make no sense. They know the maze. You don't. Dead ends are everywhere. Passages that promise escape and deliver nothing. You follow a corridor. It feels right. Then it just stops. Solid stone. Now you have to turn back. And while you're retreating, confused and frustrated, someone is waiting. The lighting makes everything worse. You're carrying torches. Maybe oil lamps. Smoke fills the tunnels. It burns your eyes, makes you cough. The defenders don't need light. They know these corridors by memory, by touch. They can move in complete darkness. You can't. Sound behaves strangely underground. Echoes bounce off stone. You hear footsteps but can't tell where they're coming from. Ahead, behind, above, below. The acoustics disorient you, frighten you. You swing at shadows, strike at nothing. Temperature shifts create another problem. Some levels are warm, some are cold. The changes affect your breathing, your stamina, your judgment. You sweat in one passage. You shiver in the next. Your body can't regulate, can't adapt. Water appears where you don't expect it. Puddles on the floor. Drips from ceilings. This isn't accidental drainage. These are deliberate obstacles. Water makes the floors slick, makes footing uncertain. You're already bent over in a narrow corridor. Now you're trying not to fall, and falling means dying. The stone doors divide the city into zones, but the zones aren't equal. Some are large, some are tiny. Defenders move quickly through small zones. Seal the door. Drop to the next level. Attackers get trapped in big zones, wandering, searching, finding nothing. There are false doors, stone wheels that look real, but they lead nowhere. They're carved into walls. You waste time trying to open them. Waste energy. Waste hope. Meanwhile, the real door is somewhere else, and it's already closed. The deepest levels are the worst. Narrower, lower, more twisted. By the time you reach them, you're exhausted. You've been underground for hours, maybe days. You're running out of supplies, running out of air, running out of will. And the passages only get harder. Some tunnels have loose stone in the ceiling, deliberately weakened. Defenders can collapse them, bury attackers alive, or block the route entirely. Force you to find another way. Force you deeper into the maze. The chapel levels have strange acoustics. Sound carries differently there. Voices echo in ways that make it seem like there are more defenders than there really are. It makes you think they're everywhere. It makes you panic. And panic gets you killed underground. You start running. Start making noise. Start giving away your position. The defenders don't rush. They wait. They listen. They follow the sound. They find you. The schoolrooms create obstacles. Low benches. Stone desks. In a fight, they become hazards. You trip over them. Crash into them in the dark. They slow you down. The defenders know exactly where every bench stands. They move around them easily. You don't. Storage rooms create another tactical problem. They're filled with clay jars, grain sacks, supplies. You can't see through them.
You can't move through them quickly. Defenders hide behind storage. Step out. Strike. Disappear again. The animal pens add confusion. Some levels housed livestock. Sheep. Goats. Maybe chickens. Animals make noise. Create movement. You think you see something. It's just a goat. You relax. And then the spear comes. There is no good way to attack this place. You can't lay siege to it. The water comes from deep underground. The food is stored inside. You can't starve them. You can't thirst them out. You can't smoke them out. The ventilation system is too effective. You can't flood it. Drainage channels prevent that. Water flows away. It doesn't pool. It doesn't rise. You can't dig around it. The rock is too hard. The city is too vast. You'd need years. Decades. And while you're digging, they're fine. Living. Eating. Sleeping. Waiting. Your only option is to go inside. Fight through. Level by level. Passage by passage. Door by door. And every level costs you. Costs you soldiers. Costs you time. Costs you morale. By the third level, your men hesitate. By the fifth, they don't want to continue. By the seventh, you've already lost. This is defensive architecture at its peak. Not castle walls. Not moats. Not towers. This is using the earth itself as a weapon. Using darkness. Using confusion. Using fear. Someone understood perfectly how to defend this space. How to turn every corridor into a trap. Every corner into an ambush. Every level into a killing ground. They didn't just build a hiding place. They built a fortress. An underground fortress designed to bleed attackers dry. Designed to make invasion impossible. Designed to make the surface world irrelevant. Whatever they feared above, down here they were safe. Not because the enemy couldn't find them, but because the enemy couldn't win.
The passages prove it. Every narrow tunnel, every low ceiling, every twisted turn, every hidden alcove, every murder hole, every trap. This city was built by people who understood war, who had fought, who had lost, who had learned, and who decided that next time the enemy would lose. The corridors are still there, still tight, still winding, still deadly. If you walked in today, if you tried to fight through, you'd die the same way ancient invaders did. The architecture doesn't care what century it is. The tactics still work. The traps still function. The maze still confuses. The darkness still terrifies. That's the genius of it. They built something timeless, something meant to protect their children and their children's children forever. But remember, even if we've forgotten why, it's easy to focus on the stone, on the tunnels, on the engineering. But there's another side to Derinkuyu, the human side. The people who lived there weren't just builders or warriors, they were ordinary people, families, children, elders, and they spent months, maybe years, underground. That changes you. Even today, people struggle in small, closed spaces. Imagine going underground with no idea when you'll see sunlight again. Let's start with the basics. Humans need light. Our bodies are wired to day and night. It helps us sleep. It keeps our minds steady. Down in Derinkuyu, real sunlight never reached most living areas. Only the upper levels received a faint hint of natural light. The rest of the city was pitch black unless you lit lamps or torches. The shadows danced on the walls, faces flickered in and out of view. After days or weeks, it was easy to lose track of time. Psychologists call this cave syndrome. When people are cut off from the outside world for too long, confusion sets in. You forget what day it is. Your internal clock drifts. Some people become depressed. Others grow exhausted. Even modern miners with electric lights and fresh air struggle. In Derinkuyu, there was no electricity, just flame, just darkness, and no clocks to help you measure the hours. People underground had to invent their own sense of time. Maybe they marked it by meals, by prayers. Maybe they listened for storms above, thunder, footsteps. But most of the world was unreachable. The surface could be calm or burning with war. You'd only know through stone. There's evidence people tried to keep life as normal as possible. Archaeologists uncovered schoolrooms with benches, places where children learned, chapels for worship, storage spaces for food, even pens for animals. They carved out areas meant to feel like home. But nothing truly replaces the sky. You can't fake sunlight. You can't substitute fresh air. The body knows. The mind knows. Let's talk about what happens to people in closed spaces. There's a study from the 1960s. A French researcher named Michel Siffre spent months inside a cave, cut off from time, no sun, no clocks. After a few weeks, he lost track of everything. He slept at random hours, ate whenever he felt like it. His sense of day and night collapsed. He grew lonely. His mind began playing tricks. He even started hallucinating, seeing things that weren't there. And that was one man in the modern world, with preparation, with support. Now multiply that by thousands. Parents trying to keep children calm, elderly people missing sunlight, young adults itching to move, all of them trapped beneath the earth, listening for signs it was safe to return. Think about the noise. The city must have been full of sound, footsteps, voices, children crying, animals bleating. Every sound echoes off stone. There's nothing soft to absorb it. No grass, no trees, just hard walls, hard floors. Everything gets louder. Every argument, every laugh, every sigh. Some people adapt, others crack under the pressure. And then there's the smell. Hundreds or thousands of people in close quarters, cooking over oil lamps, storing food, keeping animals. No matter how good the ventilation, it never smells fresh.
You grow used to sweat, smoke, damp earth. Some days it's hard to breathe, especially in the lower levels. And then there's the fear. The city wasn't a retreat. People didn't go there for comfort. They went because of danger. Maybe war, maybe something else. Every day you listened for footsteps above. Every night you wonder if someone is trying to break in. Children ask questions. Parents make up stories or tell the truth. Either way, stress hangs over everything. It's easy to imagine the panic when the city filled. Picture the rush, hundreds crowding entrances, rolling shut massive stone doors, families separated, people shouting, searching for children, for parents. Once the doors closed, the surface world vanished. You were left with whoever made it inside. Maybe you'd never see the sun again.
Let's talk about health. Life underground takes a toll on the body. Without sunlight, people can't produce vitamin D. That leads to weak bones, sore muscles, constant fatigue. Children are at most risk. Growing bodies need sunlight. Without it, they become sick. Skin grows pale. Eyes struggle to adjust. Cuts heal slowly in dark, damp air. There's little room for movement. No fields to run in. No space to stretch. Only narrow tunnels and crowded rooms. People grow stiff. Muscles waste away. Even standing upright is difficult in low corridors. Over time, people become weaker, not stronger. And food? Storage rooms held grain, dried fruit, possibly salted meat. But fresh food disappears quickly. No gardens underground. No hunting. No foraging. Eventually, meals become bland. Portions shrink. Hunger builds. Tempers shorten. Arguments become common. It's a pattern seen in every siege, every famine, every disaster. Water brings its own worries. The well system was brilliant, but it wasn't infinite. If too many people crowded in, water could run low. Maybe a pump failed. Maybe someone dropped a torch and started a fire. Disaster could strike in moments. And fixing it wasn't simple. Disease is another threat. Packed together, illness spreads fast. One cough, dozens infected. Underground, there's no sunlight to kill bacteria. No wind to carry germs away. Minor sickness can turn deadly. Archaeologists haven't found mass graves in Derinkuyu. But that doesn't mean no one died down there. Bodies may have been taken to the surface when it was safe, or hidden deeper in the maze. Then there's the mental toll. Psychologists call it cabin fever. That restless, trapped feeling after too long indoors. It turns into anger, sadness, numbness. People snap.
Small problems become huge. Fights break out. Some retreat into silence. Others try to take control. It tests patience. It tests leadership. History backs this up. During sieges, ancient writers describe neighbors turning on each other, friends becoming enemies, food stolen, trust collapsing. Even in modern times, people trapped in mines or bunkers report the same pattern. The longer you're confined, the harder it is to stay hopeful.
So, why stay? Why not flee? Why not scatter into the countryside? Because whatever drove them underground made that worse. The city wasn't a choice. It was the least terrible option. Something on the surface was more dangerous than darkness, more dangerous than hunger, more dangerous than disease. That's the uncomfortable truth. People don't bury entire communities alive unless the alternative is worse. And this wasn't a one-time emergency. They kept coming back. Generation after generation. The doors show where. The wells were maintained. The ventilation shafts were cleaned. You don't do that for a single disaster. You do that when you expect to need it again. And again. And again. Something in this region kept forcing people underground. For centuries. And here's the strange part. There's almost no written record of it. No epic poems about the time everyone vanished underground. No chronicles describing mass subterranean migrations. No legends of cities beneath the earth. Just stone. Just tunnels. Just doors. History goes quiet right where things should get loud. We have Roman records, Persian records, Byzantine records. They talk about wars, taxes, kings, but they barely mention entire populations disappearing underground. It's like it was normal, or like nobody wanted to talk about it, or like the people who knew didn't survive. The underground cities don't fit neatly into known history. They're too big, too complex, too deliberate. They weren't built quickly. They were expanded over centuries. That means whatever threat existed long enough to justify multi-generational construction projects. Let that sink in. Your grandparents start digging. Your parents expand the tunnels. You add more doors. Your children maintain the wells. Your grandchildren carve new rooms. All because something keeps returning. Something keeps making the surface unsafe. The city becomes inheritance. Not wealth. Not land. But shelter. Safety
is passed down in stone. And that might be the most haunting part of all. They didn't inherit prosperity. They inherited fear. They inherited a system designed to survive something terrible. And they kept it alive.
So, what was it? What could force entire communities to disappear underground for months at a time? The standard answer is invading armies. And yes, this region saw plenty of conflict. Hittites, Persians, Romans, Arabs, Mongols, wave after wave of conquest. But that explanation doesn't fully hold. Armies don't behave like this. They raid, they burn, they loot. Then they move on. They don't sit outside sealed underground cities for months. They don't chase civilians down 18 levels of rock. They don't force multi-generational underground engineering projects. Most invaders want land and resources, not empty tunnels. If this were just about war, simpler shelters would have worked. Caves, mountain hideouts, temporary camps. You don't build a city for 20,000 people unless you expect to need it repeatedly and for long durations. Some historians suggest religious persecution, early Christians hiding from Roman authorities. But that also falls short. Religious crackdowns are local, short-lived. They don't last for centuries. They don't require hundreds of stone doors. They don't explain escape tunnels between cities. Then there are environmental theories, volcanic eruptions, climate shifts, extreme cold. But Cappadocia's volcanoes were dormant during much of the construction, and climate events don't require defensive architecture. They don't need murder holes. They don't need spear positions. They don't need layered choke points. These cities were designed for something that could attack, something that could pursue, something that made people afraid enough to live underground. Some researchers point to bandit tribes, nomadic raiders. But again, bandits don't justify this scale. They don't force people to engineer airflow systems for sealed subterranean megacities. They steal and leave. What's left is uncomfortable. Whatever drove this behavior was persistent, predictable, and terrifying. Something that returned often enough to justify constant readiness. And that's where mainstream history goes quiet. Because there's no neat answer, just stone evidence of extreme preparation. We're left with architecture that screams urgency, with doors designed to seal forever, with tunnels meant to confuse and kill, with wells placed by people who somehow knew where underground water waited, with ventilation shafts cut straight through hundreds of feet of rock, all built by communities that clearly believed the surface world could become unlivable at any moment. They prepared not for inconvenience. They prepared for extinction. And here's where things get strange. Because this isn't just one city. Derinkuyu is the largest, but it's part of a network. There are dozens of underground cities in Cappadocia, hundreds of smaller tunnel complexes. Some are connected by miles of passageways. You could travel between settlements without ever reaching the surface. This wasn't a local project. This was regional. An entire civilization adapted to living underground. That changes the question. It's no longer, why did one group hide? It's, what happened that made an entire region build escape cities? The construction styles match. The doors follow the same designs. The ventilation systems use the same principles. This wasn't improvisation. It was standardized. Shared knowledge. Passed from one community to another. People taught each other how to disappear. And they didn't stop. Some tunnels show layers of carving from different eras. Older passages widened by later generations. New chambers added centuries after the first ones. This wasn't built once. It was maintained, upgraded, expanded, as if every generation assumed they'd need it too. And here's another detail. Many entrances were deliberately hidden, covered with houses, masked as wells, disguised behind ordinary walls. From the outside, you'd walk past and never know an underground city existed beneath your feet. That's not defensive design. That's concealment. You hide fortresses. You conceal panic rooms. You camouflage escape routes. But you don't bother hiding something unless you expect someone to be looking. And whatever they expected wasn't fooled by walls. They hid entrances. They buried shafts. They created dead ends. They wanted their cities invisible. Not just protected, invisible. And when you map all of these sites together, something emerges. The cities aren't random. They form clusters, networks, safe zones, almost like evacuation hubs, almost like planned fallback positions, almost like someone sat down centuries ago and said, if it comes again, we go here, then here, then here. And that implies memory, collective memory. Something terrible happened once. Something big enough to reshape how people lived. And instead of writing it down, they carved their response into stone. They didn't leave stories, they left infrastructure. They didn't pass down legends, they passed down blueprints. And we're standing on top of it, pretending it's just tourism. Because when you step back, the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. These cities weren't built for comfort. They were built for survival. They weren't designed to flourish underground. They were designed to endure. Every choice reflects that. The narrow corridors, the choke points, the one-way doors, the hidden entrances, the escape tunnels. This is emergency architecture on a massive scale. And it wasn't reactive, it was proactive. They didn't wait for disaster. They prepared for it, over centuries. Think about what that implies. You don't invest this kind of labor unless you expect to use it. You don't carve millions of cubic feet of rock unless you believe your future depends on it. You don't teach your children how to navigate tunnels in darkness unless you think they'll need to. This wasn't fear. This was planning. Cold, rational planning. And that's the part modern explanations avoid, because it suggests that ancient people weren't just responding to random raids, they were responding to a repeating threat, something cyclical, something that returned often enough to be built into culture. The cities functioned like lifeboats, not houses, not shelters, lifeboats. You don't live on a lifeboat, you survive on one. And you only build lifeboats if you expect the ship to sink. Whatever their world was, it wasn't stable. It was punctuated by events so severe that entire populations had to vanish underground again and again. And when the danger passed, they came back up, rebuilt, lived, waited. And when it returned, they went back down. This cycle shaped everything: their engineering, their architecture, their social systems, even their psychology. They lived knowing the surface could become deadly at any moment. That knowledge changes a civilization. It makes you cautious. It makes you communal. It makes you prepare. And maybe that's the legacy we're missing. Not monsters, not aliens, not fantasy. Just a forgotten chapter of human history where survival meant disappearing into the earth, where safety was underground, where stone was more trustworthy than sky. And they left us their answer, carved into volcanic rock. Not as a story, as a system, as a warning. And we walk over it every day, barely noticing.
Because in the end, Derinkuyu isn't about tunnels. It's about strategy. It's about what a civilization does when it accepts one hard truth: the surface is not guaranteed. These people didn't build monuments. They didn't invest in symbols of power. They invested in redundancy: multiple wells, multiple exits, layered doors, independent air systems, backup food storage. This isn't ancient mysticism. This is risk management. They assumed failure. They assumed invasion. They assumed collapse, and they engineered around it. Modern societies optimize for efficiency. They optimized for continuity. We build upward. They built inward. We trust networks and supply chains. They trusted geology. They understood something we tend to forget. Stability is temporary. Disruption is permanent. They didn't ask whether disaster would come. They asked how often, and they planned accordingly, for centuries, without speeches, without manifestos, without records, just stone, just systems, just preparation.